Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another session of ITOM podcast. In today's session, we're going to cover some common misconceptions about process automation. We're going to focus on the top 5 myths about IT process automation and the real truth behind each one of them. To enumerate these, why is automation considered to be too expensive? Number two, everything is working fine. Why should I bother changing anything? Number three, automation is just too technical, it takes too long, and it's too complicated. Number four, IT process automation takes away jobs, it results in staff reduction. And number five, the automation process doesn't meet my specific business needs. So we're going to cover these 5 topics of discussion today, the 5 common myths about IT process automation. And to help us get through this, we have one of the experts in the industry, Khalil Abdo, here with us. Khalil, thank you for joining us. Please give us a brief introduction about yourself and help us get through these myths.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Yeah. So, hi, everyone. My name is Khalil Abdo. I'm a solutions architect with Microfocus. So, I've been working in the tech industry for roughly 25 years, spent the last 23 plus specifically in automation space. So, really have a lot of background, working inside the automation space. Did my first stint over at a media company where basically got my hands on some automation tools and was able to really get a firsthand, look as to what automation really was capable of, right? Being able to do the job of, so many resources by myself and just freeing up other resources so they can focus on more mission critical things was really something that, it's a real eye opener. Now, fast forward to just a few years in, I took a services engagement where I worked with a number of customers across various verticals. So whether it was in the financial space, the insurance industries, pharmaceuticals, really got to, experience how companies and businesses operate differently and how automation was able to help them really with their marketing or even advancing, their products so they can be more competitive within the landscape.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that detailed introduction and how you've gained experience over these years with these various industries. To set the stage right, would you help explain to our audience what is automation? How would you consider in a layman's language and what it transpires to be in the IT space?
So absolutely, yes. So when we talk about IT process automation, there are many names, acronyms that really describe what automation does. So if you're thinking about IT process automation, the acronym ITPA, also known as like runbook automation, this is where you have the ability to orchestrate and integrate not just tools, but also people and processes through a workflow. Now, typically, the benefits behind that are you're going to reduce human errors, right? You're going to have faster, responses to like mission critical systems. You're able to also reduce your mean time to repair. So being able to achieve all this without allocating more resources to address the problem at hand is really just a small handful of the benefits that are part of automation using IT process automation.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for that good introduction. I'm sure all of us have our own little introduction and explanation to what automation is and in space of IT. Now, but then let's get to the myths, like the top 5 common myths that we see in the industry. We see customers believe automation is just too expensive. What do you say about that?
I would have to agree, right? If automation is not implemented correctly, or if you just, purchase a solution specific to a use case that was critical at the time, then yes, typically we've seen this across not just one, but a lot of our customers where they purchase multiple solutions, typically around a use case that was critical at the moment. Now they're left with a handful of solutions, each one requiring a different level of skill set. And typically with that, you have services. So it can get expensive at the same time, but also you have that tribal knowledge. When one person is only the subject matter expert around the tool, another person is a subject matter around that tool, then you have this, you built this silo effect, right? Where everyone is running independently. And then you have multiple solutions all doing a little of that puzzle. And I can see, and I've experienced this firsthand, working with customers where we have this tool that does this, we have this tool that does this. We can't integrate the two. If we do, it's going to require this. And you can see where you're now extending different, workflows or different use cases that need to be provided to the business in order for them to function in a timely manner. So I can definitely see and I feel the pain when I work with these customers to help address these challenges.
Now, on the same lines, customer belief, because it's too expensive, why should we bother changing anything? If everything is working fine, why do I need to make the investment? Why do I need to really do anything big if everything is working fine? What do you think is the right way to address this myth?
I get that, right? We see that all the time. Customer says, hey, can we automate this process? Yeah, we can. We have tools in place. Well, what are you doing about, this? Oh, we can write that, or we can just put a bunch of resources to help address that problem. Now you're looking at resources we're talking about top talent sitting behind their desk, working on these, small tasks that really are meaningless or of no, excitement to their current job role. When we talk about these type of situations, what I would present is, how long does it take you to do a specific task today? Right? Oh, we can do it with this tool. It takes us roughly about 2 minutes, right? Now, what if something changes, right? What if that person leaves the company? What do you do then? Now you have a problem on your hand. You're taking that one resource who has all that tribal knowledge and experience, and now he either has to cross-train someone else, or you have a software solution that's just gonna, whether it's point or even enterprise-wide, they're just going to be shelfware after a few months because no one's going to be able to take on that project. That being said, I think that it's very key to implement, when you implement IT process automation, that's implemented correctly, and you go with a solution that's going to make sense for the future growth of the business.
Gotcha. Good. That's really, in depth. Now, a lot of our customers or in the market, we have another myth saying automation is just too technical. It takes too long to implement. It's very complicated, and I am used to doing certain things in a certain way, and I'm proficient with it. I don't want to change the process. It's just too technical. But what do you say on that?
Well, I mean, if we were to go back 15 years ago, right, that would sort of make sense. Looking at some of the today's solutions and going back to the previous point, right, that we brought up earlier. So one of the previous myths was, it's complicated, it's too hard to implement. Well, if you're not doing your due diligence and selecting the right solution, you're going to definitely put yourself in that position. So we've seen this over and over across. We bought a solution. It was able to get us past this specific hurdle. Now we have another hurdle that we have to get past. And the challenge is the current solution that we have in place that we bought on a whim doesn't really address it, or we have to allocate a number of resources, maybe bring in professional services to help us get past that hurdle. Now, this is just going to be a repetitive cycle. You do this once, you do this twice, it's going to be on and on. The time that's spent doing research on selecting the right solution is going to pay itself forward in the long run. And this is one of my experiences just around, I've worked with a variety of IT process automation tools. I've been fortunate to have a number of years under my belt with the Micro Focus platform, which is operations orchestration, as well as their RPA solution. And I'll say that, that's a true end-to-end solution that really gets you not just past that initial hurdle, but future hurdles as well. So throw any use case at me and I'll be, we can rise to the challenge. It's just one of those things where if you can visualize it, you can accomplish it, right? Versus, having to struggle integrating multiple point solutions to get you to that desired result.
Got it. Got it. Now, one thing stood out was you mentioned RPA. I believe that you mean robotic process automation,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah.
This is a big myth, which when this robotic process automation came into existence in the processes, I mean, in a layman, there was there's robots, and then people think about robot walking in the aisles and doing the task. My thinking goes back to my childhood days where I used to saw the cartoon series Jetsons, and
Yeah.
then
Very
Josie the
familiar.
robot. Yeah, Josie the robot comes in and she comes and does all the home chores. That's where like my bulb just lights up taking me a flashback into my childhood days where I see it. But there's a very common misconception about this. Robotic process automation or automation in general is going to go take away my jobs. It's going to result in staff reduction. So what do you think is the right approach to look at this myth, and how can we help our listeners get the clarity on this?
Sure. It just goes back to the previous point, right? I hear that all the time. I mean, in my 20 plus years working with various businesses, you hear that, you feel it when you're in the rooms of some of these engineers that, oh, they're just going to bring in a solution, it's going to replace me. That's not the case, right? What we need to do is we need to really point out examples of self-automation first and foremost, so they can get an understanding. Things like the Google Assistant, things like, the Amazon solutions that are able to, like the Echoes, where you can talk to it, it gives you a response back. If this, then that. These are things that are typically in everyone's day-to-day life. If not, I know in my life, I have a lot of IoT devices. So I'm constantly using these devices for my day-to-day automation. But once you start thinking about that, so think about IT process automation. You talked about the robots. I look at the additional of RPA as intelligent automation, where it's just a combination of like RPA and artificial intelligence to really automate the complex end-to-end processes. So when there's a need for that human to interact. So think of these legacy systems. And for the folks who work with legacy systems, know how challenging working with those systems are, especially where you need to interact through a console. You can't, there's a lack of an API or no API at all, right? Or improperly or poorly authored API. So being able to work in introducing RPA to handle that UI function of logging into a console, maybe parsing some data, stripping that data, formatting, whatever it may be. This is really what it does. And it's also, we also need to empathize that automation is really a tool that will work alongside, not instead of them, right? So in most cases, introducing an automation technology to your employees, it's generally to work alongside them to make their jobs like easier and save them time, right? I think it's very important that within your business or your workplace, if we know that it's not going to display it, in most cases it will not, right? Any existing employees, we need to stress this to them as well. It's really, making the employee tasks easier. It's just one of those things where I had a real experience with a manager. We were doing a data transformation project, and he was like, "Hey, listen, Khalil, I have a problem. I have my top tier guys. They're nervous. And they're not going to want us. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I want to prepare you up front." I go, listen, this is really about how it's going to help them, do their jobs more efficiently, right? Where if it's taking them 5 days to do a specific task where they're burning all these resources, we're going to automate the stuff that they don't want to do, right? And we'll sit alongside with them. We'll work through them. We'll visualize what can be automated, what needs to be done by them for that operator input, for example, that needs that actual intelligence from a human. And then we can, help build the building blocks for those previous steps for that workflow. And then we can go in and sign off on it and do the final review, for example. So fast forward a few weeks after the project had been completed, and I'm walking in there, like one of the engineers in question who was nervous about, working with us, she said, "I got to talk to you." I go, "Well, what's going on?" He goes, "I have to say, this was the first weekend that I've had, in a long time where I didn't have to worry about, being on call or monitoring the systems to make sure everything went okay." So that was a good experience. And it was also, it brings the joy of what we can do with customers to help them have those type of experiences.
That's great. You can tell us that it's not really taking away job, but it's doing the small, repetitive, and the tasks that bore people at times. The same thing that they keep doing every day. They can just leave that to automation, and they can simply use their valuable time to something more important, something more meaningful. Maybe create some more services for the organization rather than spending their time towards fixing old stuff.
And that's absolutely, you're right. You're basically freeing them to do more important, more satisfying work, right? If I can have an employee that's Said no one ever, I love to sit down and chug all these reports, on a Monday morning so the line of business can have, these dashboards. We can automate most of those steps that are time consuming, as well as embed some of that logic where this is automated. What kind of report do you want? Add a few clicks here and there, hit submit, it'll generate a nice clean report. And now you can focus on more, mission critical, exciting opportunities as far as tax is concerned within the business.
That's great. Great info. And that example just nailed it. Understanding, this engineer was worried about is going to take away my job. But then, you mentioned that how he was relieved that particular weekend when automation was implemented, that he didn't have to worry about logging in the middle of the night checking the stuff because it just worked perfectly. There are challenges at times to bring it to perfection, because every process is unique. So that's just a great example. So far, you've helped us cover why automation is considered to be too expensive, why people believe that everything is working fine, why should they bother changing anything. You've helped us understand that myth and how should we cater to that. You also helped us explain automation is too technical, it's too complicated, it takes too long to be implemented. You helped us explain why that's the case, and we shouldn't be just looking at that. We should look at the bigger picture. And lastly, you just explained about the robotic process automation and the myth about how it's going to take away jobs, but that's not the real case. It's actually going to augment and help them to do more meaningful things. Now, one
Absolutely.
more myth on our chart today I want to cover up, and we need your help on it. So people believe, yes, automation is great. Now I understand what automation is and how it can help me, but how do I know that it meets my specific business needs? How do I find out if this tool or this automation that I'm thinking is the right candidate to automate? Can you help us through some common use cases or something small that people can begin with, get the taste of automation, and then they can, once they understand it, they use it, they see the benefit, they can grow it as they need in their organization? Help us understand that, and help us how can they identify which is the best automation for their business needs.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to. So yeah, when we talk about automation, right, it's no longer as you would hear in the past, say resetting a password or starting a service, cleaning up log files. We're getting into like a little bit more expansive or use cases that really span not just across, various departments and verticals, but also specifically around the business unit. For example, like if you're in the financial services industry, being able to handle like mortgage processing sounds simple as is. If you've ever applied for a mortgage, we know that takes days, sometimes weeks, because a lot of that manual paperwork needs to be handheld, has to be screened manually. Being able to handle that with automation really saves a lot of time. Think of credit card processing, right, in the financial services industry. Human resources, being able to hire a new employee, so new hire onboarding, new employee offboarding, being able to do screening of candidates as they're being interviewed for specific roles within that business. If you're in the medical industry or in your healthcare, think of handling patient records or and things and so forth. So these are just some of the use cases. I mean, we can go on, but from a compliance standpoint, being able to handle all the compliance and auditing, so that doesn't have to be handled by a physical person, because that is by definition those mundane tasks, right? If you've ever seen in a business, and I've seen this firsthand, where prior to automation, here's a new employee we need to onboard. You're going through a stack of papers, right? And you're reviewing everything. And that's like, it can be sometimes 20 going through a resume, making sure this candidate meets all the requirements, all the check boxes. These are some of the actual use cases that we would definitely recommend to automate,
Mhm.
because the return is immediately noticeable. Where if I can, for example, onboard a new employee in 20 minutes versus 2 to 3 days, and we've all been through that. Go back 10 years in your history. How long did it take you to get onboarded with that company, right? And this is really where automation really shines, and that's where I would start for sure.
Wow, that's great. Thank you for sharing those. It's not just IT process automation. You actually told us how automation can be implemented in different verticals. You mentioned HR, you mentioned compliance, you mentioned about auto processing. So that's just amazing how automation is just not resetting a password or a simple task like generating a report. You could also implement in different verticals of the business or different departments and still get the value out of it. That's just great. Now, if somebody was to start with automation, something small, do you have like a common recommendations? How do they shortlist? What is the right ideal candidate for a process to automate within the organization? Let's just take IT for instance.
Sure.
If it's an IT process, how would somebody identify if this is the right candidate, this is the right process I should look at automating? And as they say in a layman's word, the low hanging fruit. Let's find out the low hanging fruit. Let's prick that fruit and see if we can reap the benefits. Help us find that.
Absolutely, right. And one thing that's worked for us in the past and for the customers as well is that we generally, a lot of these requests that come in for specific cases. So think of end users, they work for X company, they're always submitting requests to the help desk. What are the most common requests that are coming in? And obviously at the top of those, you're going to see procurement. I need a new laptop, or I have an issue with my laptop or desktop. I need to reset my password. I don't have any access, or I need to take time off. I need to request specific records, personal records, so I can, obtain a mortgage or whatever, get some sort of a loan for school. So these are the ones that are typically on the top of the list. And what we generally work with customers are we'll log into their IT service management tool and we'll say, you know what, give me the top 10 offenders or the top 5 offenders, the ones that have hundreds or even thousands of cases every month. Those are the ones you want to start off with because they're taking the most of the time or the biggest portion of time. Where if just give an example, if we were just to focus around password management,
Hmm.
around legacy applications, for example, where we have 10,000 cases, and that's a big number, but I've been in customer environments where that's an actual like 5,000 plus is on average around password resets because there are some challenges around password resets, specifically around legacy applications. So being able to handle those requests and IDC values around a typical password reset is roughly around $80. Just do the math. Even if it's 2,000 times $80, what's that return on investment for the business? It's that number is very, it's a very good number to say the least, right? But that's where I would generally start. We typically work with customers that here are my top biggest offenders. Or even say, listen, when we work with the customers, if you had an easy button, what would you want to manage or automate day one? And they would say, and you'll get like a bunch of light bulbs. I hate doing, reports every Monday because I have to come in early. I have to go log on to these 5 or 10 systems. I have to parse data. I have to merge data. I have to format data. Then I have to create a dashboard for it. That is an ideal use case. That's where you have the quick wins, not just internally, but also to the line of business, because now they're getting their reports on time,
Yep.
accurate, and and you could even make it where it's self-service. Now the line of business, I want this report with this data between this period. They can select those little inputs and basically just hit submit, and that report is generated and sent directly to your inbox. So being able to provide that type of experience and that ease of use to the line of business is going to definitely make the IT department shine when it comes to these specific use cases.
That's great. I'm sure some of our audience might be looking at, okay, I have been looking at automation for some time and I've been thinking what to automate. I mean, I'm listening to our conversation and this podcast, probably it can help them understand what is they can begin with and how can they can start looking at the reaping the benefits of this automation. Well,
Absolutely.
Khalil, thank you so much for all the insights and your time today. You are definitely have helped us understand a little bit more in depth about the automation industry and how process automation in general is considered, in these different myths about being expensive. Why do I need to even implement this? Or, it's just too technical or it's going to take away jobs. So thank you for helping us understand and demystify these myths about IT process automation. Anything you like to add towards the end of our
Yeah,
podcast?
it was my pleasure. Obviously automation, it's one of those things where, I have a strong passion for it, and I've seen the value it provides the business. And it's one of those things where you have someone that's hesitant, automation, as I said, that fear. You have a small discussion, even showing them a specific use case that helps them in that specific job role. And then I guarantee they'll overcome that fear fairly quickly.
All right, great. Well, Khalil, thank you once again for your time today. Thank you for our audience for listening to today's episode of ITOM Podcast. Meet you next time. Thank you again.